The idea is, how do you have confidence taking the much bigger, bolder step? And part of it's then coming at it from a purpose-driven place, right? As individuals, right, when we're driven by purpose, we're able to make bolder decisions in our lives. The same thing for corporations or organizations. It's thinking about it from a place of what is the value that they really want to create, again, long term. And when you have that vision, it makes it a lot easier to align all the resources, right? To bring the talent in that you want.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the PeopleHum interview series. This is your host Neha at PeopleHum. PeopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for 8PM, that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the PeopleHum blog and channel that receives more than 200,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. We have with us today Nancy Giordano. Nancy is committed to strengthening the organizational capacities and societal structures necessary to leverage significant post-age technology advances and ensure a safe and thriving future. As founder of PlayBig Incorporated, she and her PYNKRs, People You Need to Know, guide visionary C-suite leaders through this rapidly transforming society. Summarizing all that she has learned so far, she will soon be launching her first book titled Leadering: The Way Visionary Leaders Play Bigger. Nancy also recently created the FEM Futurist Society to share compelling conversations with leading futurists around the world. She has been invited to give over 60 keynote talks around the world these past 2 years. Described as endlessly optimistic, Nancy is a strategic futurist, global keynote speaker, corporate strategist, and gatherer with a drive to help organizations and visionary leaders transform to meet the escalating expectations ahead. So we are extremely honored and happy to have someone of your stature with us today, Nancy. We're thrilled to have you, and welcome to PeopleHum.
Thank you. I'm excited about the conversation.
Us too. So Nancy, you've been the founder and strategic futurist at PlayBig for 15 years now. So can you tell us a bit about the work that you do there?
It's definitely shifted over time, right? So when I started the company at the beginning, it was more just trying to make sense of, it was really about helping companies become more value-centric. And as things became more complex on the communications horizon, the idea was that you couldn't just reach people in sort of the traditional way. And it wasn't just about understanding customers, it was customers wanting to understand you. And so we really helped companies get more clear in their own sense of purpose and the sense of values and being able to express that. But then there was this big technological shift that happened in 2007 and 2008, where there was this mobile and social and cloud revolution. And when people came through that and tried to operate the same way that they had in the past, it didn't work. And so then we helped organizations really think through how society had changed, how technology was shifting the way that we connected and we communicated and we purchased. And what mattered to us, and we started to see an income split. We started to see a lot of the big shifts that we see now emerge then. And we went into organizations and tried to help them. And some were able to absorb and respond to new information, and some were not. And it was really frustrating. And so I spent several years putting a lot of energy into that work and trying to help organizations prepare better for what was coming. And then finally decided, I got frustrated, and I went to work on the technology side. So I joined an artificial intelligence startup, and then we built a conference on the 7 most disruptive technologies for C-suite leaders. And all that work, I realized how unprepared we are for the future that we're heading into. And that it's not about understanding artificial intelligence or virtual reality or any of the technologies. Those are, not easy to understand, but we can certainly develop capacities around that. But it's really about a much deeper understanding as humans and as organizations that we need to change the way we think. That we really need to approach this really differently, and that we can't bring a 20th century mindset to a 21st century world. And so now I've been really committed to that conversation and helping businesses better prepare on a much bigger level for what is coming. That's why I'm excited about the book. There's a lot packed in there that helps explain my worldview.
That definitely sounds like a very enriching experience. And Nancy, something that I personally want to add to this is that a lot of people that we've interviewed, since we've been talking to many of them since the pandemic began, a lot of people are of the opinion that technology has just helped to accelerate a change that was already setting the stage for us, and we had no idea that was going to happen. But what really excites me about this is that you already identified that technology is something that will be helping us in the future, and that's sort of the way in which your approach towards all of this went, and also that you also do identify that it's not just the technology, but also the people that use the technology. So I feel like
Right.
that's an insight to note. So that's absolutely amazing. Thanks a lot for that.
That's a key, though. I mean, I really do think that that is the key, right? If you put humans at the center of whatever it is that we design, both technologically and business model wise, and really think through its implications, not just for this organization, but for society as a whole, then we can develop really extraordinary solutions to really complex problems, which is the exciting part. And that's the part that keeps me very optimistic. It's just that if we keep bringing such a small mindset to it, or short-term mindset to it, or one in which we aren't thinking about the people that are involved in this inside and out, then it's really dangerous. Right, we'll have extraordinary capacity and potent ability to impact things, and we need to do it in a way that's really thoughtful and caring.
Absolutely. And when you say that we have to look at what suits the people than the organizations, I feel like that's a way of saying that you're looking at the big picture here. Because
Yeah.
as true as that may be, people come and go, but we're looking at the bigger picture at the same time. So it's not really just about organizations. So thanks a lot. I feel like that's definitely.
Yeah, and we are humans. Well, sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say we're also humans that are floating in and out of those organizations, and even how we do that is going to shift and change. Right? We're not going to just be aligned with one, organization forever. We are going to actually float more between them, and so that whole is a whole nother conversation about the work we do as workers or as talent, as opposed to just the people who are, consuming or building or participating in the technologies.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Nancy, we've all seen numerous changes during this pandemic, and every major challenge follows certain radical ramifications. So as per your experience, could you talk about the shift from the industrial era to the productivity era, and what are your observations from that?
I mean, that's what I feel really strongly about. I mean, people keep talking about this fourth industrial era, and I just don't think that that's it. When you really look closely at what's happening, we're exponentially shifting to a very different kind of physics in terms of what the technology will allow for and how we contribute to that as talent again and as a society. And so I really do think we need to rename it. And so productivity revolution seems to be the better way to frame it for me. The idea is that we will be exponentially again able to produce things, able to exchange things, able to create value so differently. And so that has huge implications on the resources that we steward, but also how we should distribute that productivity. Right? I don't think that we've thought about it that way, but the fact is we're producing so much and we'll use less talent to be able to produce it. There's, some really big questions societally about how we ensure that everyone is participating in that and being rewarded through a digital age that we're heading into. And we already see such disparities in wealth inequality and income inequality, education, health, et cetera. We've been seeing that, to your point, for a long time. It was not that it didn't exist before the pandemic, but we certainly became much more aware of it. One of my favorite phrases is that we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same size boat. And I think that we're becoming more appreciative of that. And so that's just now. Imagine when you end up with a big wave of work dislocation, right? When people aren't able to get skilled enough in time or aren't able to be able to cross some of those divides in time, what do we do then? And so I think that's a really important part. If we can see all the upsides of greater productivity and hopefully more sustainably generated, but we also have to think about how we distribute that in ways that people all have access to it and are, again, part of the societal growth.
Absolutely. You've given all of us a lot to think about. And I feel like as a layman, if I were to think about it, the very definition of productivity has also changed. I mean, who knew that we'd all be just sitting at our homes and, conversing with each other via screens and getting so much done. And there comes the question of, also dividing time between what is your personal life and what is your professional life. And then the entire issue of whether, you can be somebody who balances the two and all of those things. So I feel like what you just told us gives us a lot to think about, and it puts a lot of things into perspective. So thanks a lot for that answer.
Well, and I'll just dive into that for 1 second and say there's a lot of, to your point, insights into that. Part of it is being more whole humans, bringing ourselves to work, right? So it's not like we have the mask of work on over here and then the mask of our life on over there. So we're seeing that blend already from a time perspective and trying to figure out how to balance it perspective and a space perspective. But it will also be, I think, psychologically or emotionally, as we decide that we really need to bring all of our senses and our capabilities and our feelings and perspectives into work and that humanity. I did a talk the other day and someone asked me a question about how do we teach leaders to be compassionate, and I thought, oh my gosh, the hope is that all leaders are compassionate, right? Because if we're compassionate as humans, why don't we bring that into work? And so those are the kinds of things that we will become much more comfortable doing as we head into this more blended.
Absolutely. So, Nancy, you are launching your first book, Leadering, The Way Visionary Leaders Play Bigger. So can you tell us what it's about and what we can look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a culmination of the talks that I've been giving over the years, and the conversations. Like every time I give a keynote talk, and now I think we're up to 80 or 90, I get briefed by an organization or by a company about what it is that they're going through and why they're creating this event and why they want this conversation to happen. And almost every single time the conversation is the same, right? They're in the middle of a radical transformation, and they're trying to help people understand A, what is happening, or B, how to navigate more successfully, or C, give them confidence, right, that they can do this and they're well held. And so I've been thinking a lot about what gets in the way of that. And so finally put it all together in a book. And the reason it's called Leadering is because I think part of it, again, it goes back to this big mindset shift. In the industrial era, there was a certain way that we were taught that we were how to conduct business and what the role of business was. And I think that's just all outdated at this point. And so again, if we bring that old industrial mindset into a much more dynamic, fast-moving future, we will not only miss opportunities, but we can create huge problems that are actually even more difficult to clean up. And so for me, if you take it from a noun to a verb, right? A noun, which is leadership, was static and hierarchical and closed very intentionally in order to be able to root out all variability so that we would not be, surprised by anything, in order to be able to ensure consistent growth and scalability and short-term profitability, right? That was the mandate for business. And now you move into an era where it's constant innovation and constant experimentation, and we have to think about our what we're producing over not a short term, but much longer term, and not just even in terms of decades, but in terms of generations. So, we're going to have this power to really influence those things. And because everything is up for redesign right now, I mean, that's really the most striking part, is that we're not just sort of evolving. We're at a moment of giant transformation. Like every industry, every enterprise will be rethought, from education to finance to healthcare to food. Food's going through the biggest revolution right now that it's had since refrigerated rail cars, and it's going to continue, right? So just imagine how much is being redesigned and rethought. We can do it in a much healthier, stronger, better way if we bring a different mindset to it. And we do think about these things, again, more holistically, more systemically, and over a longer period of time in order to support constant innovation. Like that's the fun part, right? We will be actually able to be more confident with short-term experiments, knowing that we're building for a much healthier long-term future.
Absolutely. So when you talk about a transformative process that undergoes cultures and societies as times change, I feel like that's going to be very interesting to read, because even though leadership as a concept is pretty universal, I'm sure that there are certain sections of people who have different views about it, sometimes conflicting, sometimes as diverse as they could be. So I feel like this is something we should really definitely look forward to. And I know I personally do. I'm sure that our viewers and listeners will share my opinion about that. So we'll definitely be on the lookout for it.
Good. It's filled with lots and lots of stories and case studies and statistics. It's very backed up. It's not just a point of view. It really shows literally how visionary leaders play bigger, right? There are ways in which they do it. Let's learn from them.
Wow. That sounds very interesting. You've previously designed a leadership summit to encourage C-suite executives to confidently explore several of the most disruptive emerging technologies. So could you tell us what they are and maybe share your experience in doing so?
Yeah, I mean, this was now 5 years ago, so it wasn't actually as recent, but even as 5 years ago, we were having this conversation around artificial intelligence, around virtual reality and augmented reality and robotics and nanotechnology and cybersecurity and changes in human-machine interface. I think that was all of them. And even so now there's even more, right? We can talk much more about, distributed web and about Internet of Things and sensors everywhere. And there's an increasing array of technologies that we need to be paying attention to. But what was fascinating about that conversation is to bring people into it in sort of three parts. So for each one of those technologies, we had three voices. One was an industry leader that could explain it in 5 or 10 minutes. We had an industry practitioner who could show how currently that technology is being deployed and why it was useful. And then we had a visionary who could talk to where it's going to go over the next 5 to 10 years and the implications it would have on everything from business models to intellectual property rights to ethics, et cetera. And so with each of those conversations, you understood what it is, why it matters, and where it's going, right, times 7. And so it gave a very extraordinary view as to where the world is headed and what we need to be prepared for. And that's really, I think, the key is, do we understand what the future needs and expects of us? That's there's a compass that I think we need to be using instead of an old map. So if we are getting rid of the old map, it's old terrain and it doesn't work anymore, right? We can replace it with a compass. And the first point of my compass is, what does the future need and expect? And that conference did a really, really smart job of laying that out. And then the second is, then what are you unique positioned to create and contribute to that future? And that's as a person, individual, that's as a team, that's as an organization, that's as an industry, and increasingly as a nation. We are seeing nations think about where it is that they want to play on this future, and the kind of role that they want to have in overall society around that. And so these are important questions, and this is the extraordinary moment in time, is that we get to think through them in such a bold and expansive way. But I think what was interesting is it really opened people's eyes. They realized that there was a lot more shifting, and we could see that was going to transform, industries. I remember having a long conversation during one of the sessions, because we had these three people, and then we would have a panel discussion about it. And the insurance. What is the future of insurance? Right? If you have autonomous vehicles, car insurance goes down, but suddenly you have a house full of sensors. Home security goes up, and so there will just be these shifts in what it is that is needed and what it is that we need to deliver. And so I think it just opened up our eyes to a lot of that conversation and gave people, I think, a lot more to work with and not feel like they're going to be blindsided by.
I'm sure that's a very comprehensive way of looking at things. And I'm pretty sure that leaders at all points of their lives have probably had these questions, maybe not all of them at the same time, but it's just wonderful how this is so intricate and, also connected. And I'm really glad that you spoke about that to us. That's really extremely interesting.
But that's the advantage that I have, because I'm not thinking about supply chain and my P&L statement and who I need to hire tomorrow, right? There are many, many issues that business leaders are trying to deal with right now. And so I have this incredible luxury, I guess, if you will, or being able to hold the space for or imagine what comes next and be able to help us build the pathway to it. But part of it is thinking systemically. It is thinking much more synergistically. It's understanding why this over here connects to this over here, connects to that over there, which creates this opportunity over here or this threat over there. Because often we think just way too small. And so one of the things we talk about in leadering is this idea about being much more audacious versus incremental. Right. Like historically, this goes back to risk. One of the theories, one of the concepts in the book is about risk. And I think that part of the issue is that we were told that all these things, if we do it this way, will keep us safe. And those are all the things now that are creating risk.
Absolutely.
Right? In the 20th century, that kept us safe. In the 21st century, that actually makes us very vulnerable. And one of those things is around this idea that, if we keep everything small and we just do everything incrementally, then we won't actually put ourselves out too far and we won't have risk too much. But the reality is, if you do that, somebody else comes in and just goes, shroom, and you haven't actually played the game very big. So the idea is, how do you have confidence taking the much bigger, bolder step? And part of it is then coming at it from a purpose-driven place, right? My colleagues at Singularity University talk about a massively transformative purpose. And I was just having a conversation with someone about this again yesterday. As individuals, right, when we're driven by purpose, we're able to make bolder decisions in our lives. The same thing for corporations or organizations. It's thinking about it from a place of what is the value that they really want to create, again, long term. And when you have that vision, it makes it a lot easier to align all the resources, right? To bring the talent in that you want, to know where they want to make investments and understand how to test for things. So it just provides a really different kind of energy inside these organizations to be able to move. So there's so much.
Absolutely. And I feel like what you just spoke about, knowing how to put all of this together, somewhere also speaks about to what extent you have a comfort zone around you. And more than that, to what extent are you aware that you actually have all of that around you? So even though everybody does not think in the same way, I'm pretty sure that that's a very nuanced answer and gives us a lot to think about. How are we doing as leaders? Are we really looking at what we think is the big picture, or is it actually the big picture? So I'm sure that we all will be thinking about this right now. So thanks a lot for that. And Nancy, do you have any passing remarks for us?
No, but I think you just made a really interesting point that we're not doing this alone, right? We are doing this in community with others, and whether that is within your family or your neighborhood or your whatever community that you're a part of, but also it is even inside organizations, other organizations that we are connected to, and building these ecosystems of learning and exchange and support, because the problems that we're heading into and or the opportunities that we get to take on are much more complex. As we get more data in, as we understand more, as we understand how to solve these things from a more bold and audacious perspective. And so this is not a solo game. It is definitely a much more connected game. I was just interviewing yesterday a good friend of mine, or the day before, who'd written the book Team Human, Douglas Rushkoff. And survival is not an individual sport, it's a team sport. And so recognizing what it means to build those kinds of meaningful connections, I think, are really important. It's really one of the keys to this whole thing.
Absolutely. And I don't feel like we could have ended this interview on a better note than that. So thanks a lot, Nancy. All of your answers were very nuanced, and I'm pretty sure that, like I said earlier, even though leadership is a universal concept, I'm pretty sure that after listening to you today, many leaders have something to consider and question. So thanks a lot for that. It was wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.